Hi everyone. Today I want to talk about my first time going through the Mormon temple and what that was like for me and how it was very, very different from what I expected. Now, this is a sort of a hard thing for me to do because the temple ceremony is complicated and supposed to be very, very secret. There are people who have shared it online, however, so I don't feel that those of you who don't know will have that difficult of a time in finding what goes on in it. I will give some information on it in this video. However, I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail, mostly because I'm focusing on my own reaction. And so, for those of you who haven't been through the temple, I would recommend searching it out and finding information on what goes on in the temple elsewhere if you're curious or if this video is in any way confusing to you. But I just wanted to share what my feelings were when I went through the temple and some of the things that made the experience difficult for me. Now, to do this, I'm going to be looking through a journal entry that I wrote a few years ago when I was still going to church and kind of explain what my thoughts were at the time I wrote this entry and what my thoughts were, what my thoughts are now. I wrote a list of things that bothered me when I went through the temple, and I'll explain what they were and why they bothered me. The first thing that bothered me was that they actually do exchange money inside Mormon temples. There are two ways that I saw that this happens when I went through. One is that they will allow you to rent temple clothing if you don't have it. So you can pay to use temple clothing from that the temple keeps ready to be used. And then another is there's a cafeteria inside the temple and you can pay to eat there. And both of those really made me uncomfortable because growing up, I had heard so many times the story of Jesus getting very angry about people exchanging money inside the temple. And then to find out that it was done inside the Mormon temple just made me very uncomfortable. It felt like it was wrong to me. And so that was the first thing that stressed me out, was having to pay in order to use their temple clothes. The second thing about what went on in the temple that stressed me out was that at the time when we did initiatories, we only did them with our garments, which is our underwear, the new special underwear that we're given to wear when we go through the temple, and a shield, which is sort of like a poncho over that. And it left me feeling not very dressed. Now, of course, when I went in to do the initiatory, the only people around were women. However, I still felt uncomfortable doing that for the first time. Now, people are fully clothed when they do that, apparently. I don't know because I haven't been through in a long time, but that's what I have heard. So that is something that has changed. The third thing that upset me when I went through the temple was that I didn't like the new name I was given. I had heard that new names tended to be similar to the first name of the person that got them. And so I thought that I would get a new name that was similar to my name. And I liked my name. So finding out that I was going to get this new name that was not similar to my name at all and that I didn't like stressed me out, especially since, for all I knew, what I thought was that this was going to be my name for all eternity. And that really bothered me because I didn't like the name. But there was nothing that I could do about it. So now I know that it was a generic thing where every person who went to the temple that day who was a woman got the same name. But at the time, I didn't know that. So I was just stressed out and frustrated and shocked that I had this name that I didn't like because it never occurred to me that that might happen. The fourth thing that bothered me when I went through was that the order of events depicted in the creation sequence, when they showed the film, that part of it is the creation of the world, the order of events was different from what was listed in the scriptures. And that weirded me out. The next thing that weirded me out was that the temple clothing that we wore as part of the endowment ceremony was not all white. There were green aprons that we wore as part of that. And that stressed me out because people made a big deal when I was growing up about how clothing is white. Clothing that we wear to receive temple ordinances was white. That was a huge deal growing up, hearing that. And so finding out that it wasn't entirely white stressed me out and made me uncomfortable. Then the next thing that stressed me out was that I had been told at BYU by BYU professors before I went through the temple that some of the things Paul said were sexist, the Apostle Paul in the Bible. And one of those things was the idea of wives submitting to their husbands. Another was the idea of women wearing veils, and that being symbolized by women usually having long hair and so forth. Now, it's hard to remember if it was these specific things that they said were sexist, but those were some of the things that he said that I thought were sexist according to them. Then I went through the temple, and in the temple, women do promise, or did promise, they've changed that too, but women did promise to hearken to the counsel of their husbands as he hearkens to the counsel of the Father. And that was unexpected and reminded me a lot of what Paul said. And then women also veil their faces during the prayer portion of the ceremony in the temple, and women have veils and men do not. And again, that just reminded me that of what Paul said, and it made me feel that I had been deceived in a way, because I had thought these things that Paul was saying were sexist, and now I find out they're still going on in the temple. And that really bothered me. It bothered me to think that God was sexist. The next thing that bothered me had to do with the way that garments are explained in the temple ceremony being completely different from the way they were explained in the preparation pamphlets that I was given. They didn't get into the real reasons for why garments are worn, I felt, in the preparation materials. And so then to find out that there were whole other different reasons for why people were wearing garments just surprised me, and I wasn't prepared for that. And looking back on it, I do feel like the preparatory materials were somewhat deceptive in that respect because they had me going in preparing for one thing and then I got something different. So then the next thing that I'm going to mention that bothered me actually was after I left the temple and everyone assumed that I had had a great time and everything was wonderful, and I was asked to bear my testimony about the temple in Relief Society the day after I'd gone through. And the way I described it in my journal later when I was writing it down, and this was a journal entry that I wrote a few years ago when I was still going to church, like I said. I described it as feeling like I was being railroaded into giving this testimony, and that was really frustrating for me. I didn't like that at all. And then I wrote in my journal here something that I'm going to read. The problem is, I thought that I was prepared for the temple, and I thought a person could tell if they were prepared for the temple. I knew about the presentations and thought that was the weird part. I didn't know that there was also a bunch of other stuff that it was possible to find super weird too. I'd read the Old Testament before, and I'd grown up in the church all my life, and I'd read the book Preparing to Enter the Holy Temple, and I'd always tried to be a good, obedient person, and I'd answered the temple worthiness questions honestly. So I didn't think I could get much more prepared than I was, and I thought that if you were prepared, then it wouldn't be that weird for you. Because before I was in doubt, I'd heard a sister from the Relief Society podium talk about how she hadn't understood when she first went through why some people were weirded out by it. Because for her, it made so much sense and was so spiritual. So, since people who had weird or uncomfortable experiences when getting in doubt don't talk about them in front of everyone, and since the people who had completely positive experiences just assume that's what it's like for everyone, I felt pretty disappointed that I wasn't able to have an all positive experience myself, and it was very hard for me. And it took me years to come to terms with some of the concerns about the temple ceremony, especially since you don't want to talk about what happens in the temple outside of the temple too much because you're afraid of crossing the line sooner than you think you have. But it's hard to find a way to talk to someone knowledgeable or that you know is knowledgeable when you're inside the temple. So I spent years with questions on my mind that I would have asked someone if I'd only known the appropriate way to do so, and that was hard too. And so those were my concerns specifically with the temple ceremony when I went through. Now, a lot of the temple ceremony has been changed, especially recently with COVID, and I don't know what all the changes are because I haven't been through and don't plan on ever going through again. But I wanted to share this because this was a difficult experience for me. And looking back on it now, after having distanced myself from the church, I do feel that the temple ceremony is very disturbing, and it's become less and less disturbing over time, but that doesn't take it away from its disturbing roots. And I wish that I had never gone through the temple. I wish that I had never gone on my mission, which is what required me to go through the temple. But I have. And I just want to say that it's a very difficult experience for a lot of people. So I don't expect anybody who is currently attending church to ever watch this, but I guess I just want people to know that the temple is not what it looks like on the outside. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Hope you enjoyed watching this video. Please let me know in the comments if you've been through the temple, what your experience was like. And I'll see you next time. Bye.